I am John DeVore. Welcome to the channel. Today's a record review. It's a records review. Not really review either. Maybe it's a review of an artist. That's better. It's a review of an artist. And I'm not even really reviewing him. The artist is someone who is about the same height as me, the great bass player Ron Carter. Ron Carter is someone who is often mentioned in that group of recording artists who have been on the most recordings. Sometimes I hear it's Ray Brown, sometimes I've heard it's Ron Carter. But Ron Carter has been recorded on at least high hundreds, if not thousands of records. He's in his 80s now. He was in the 60s in one of Miles Davis's legendary quartets. But today I am focusing mostly on the records where he is a band leader. And even that category is pretty giant. My Ron Carter collection is probably that big, surpassed by a few artists, not including classical composers, because that's sort of cheating. Yeah, like my Miles and Coltrane sections are probably a little bigger, but the Ron Carter section is one of the biggest in my collection for sure. I love his records. I actually like his compositions as well. He's a great writer as well as player. One of the funny things about Ron Carter's own discography, so while they are generally really great, enjoyable, there are definitely some clunkers in there. There's a couple of 70s jazz fusion or like funk fusion style records. One of them is Anything Goes, which I picked up because it's got the drummer Steve Gadd on at least one or two tracks. But it is, for me, unbearably corny. The playing is awesome, masterful. It is funky as hell, but it's just corny for me. But that may not be the case for some people. Like I said, it's great recording, really good sounding. Generally, that's another thing about Ron Carter's recordings, is they tend to sound good. I know Ron Carter is an audiophile. He's one of us. The other thing because his recording history is so broad, there's a lot of variation in there. His band leading records go all the way back. They go back early. So one of the earliest ones that I have is Where with Dolphy and Mal Waldron. This is a great record, and this goes all the way back to '61. I don't know if it's his earliest band leading exploit, but it's the earliest one in my collection. And I'm just gonna show a bunch of the records that I had sort of pulled out. Another one, this one here, Crossings, Red Garland and Philly Joe Jones. This is a great record that is mostly straight up jazz, straight up bop. Great sounding. This is a late 70s Galaxy. I am not going in chronological. I don't know. Maybe I will accidentally. This is earlier than that though. This is another one, Blues Farm. I got too many things going on here. This is a much bigger ensemble with drum monster Billy Cobham, Ralph McDonald, Bob James, Richard T., Gene Bertoncini, and Sam Brown. Obviously, a little bigger lineup. Another great sounding one. Also, Hubert Law's on this. Another thing that you're going to find with Ron Carter records is a lot of jazz flute. And that's not a bad thing, necessarily. For some people, maybe it's a bad thing. But good jazz flute is good. How about that for a statement? Here's a live record with Tony Williams and Hank Jones. Hank Jones on piano. This is a great one. This is mid-70s. Great sounding. And then here's one. This is a little after that. Yeah, 1980. This is another one with Hubert Laws, Billy Cobham, and then beyond that, we've got Kenny Barron on piano this time, J.J. Johnson on trombone. This is a bigger group. These are just, these are great records. So some of these are definitely some of these 70s ones. This is fairly straight up jazz. Some of these 70s ones definitely go more towards the funk flavor. And there are so many records. Parade, Peg Leg, All Blues. All of them are great in some way. One of the weird things, and one of the things, as I was sort of listening through the Ron Carter records that I own, a lot of them I've had for a really long time, and it was so much fun just to plow through them. Ron Carter plays acoustic bass. He also plays cello, and he bows and plucks both of those things. So in a lot of his records, he is double tracking, I think. So he will lay down a nice big fat bass line on his bass, and then he'll come in and play more melodic stuff on a cello, often pizzicato, often plucking, but sometimes bowing. And I love the sound and the feel of a bass-led group in which the bass player becomes one of the lead instruments, carrying verses and choruses and things like that, which Ron Carter does on all of his records to a greater or lesser extent. One of the things that sort of goes hand in hand with that is intonation, and it's sort of like pitchiness or in-tune-ness. Bear with me, but right now I'm gonna talk a little bit about the bass as an instrument. So when I say XYZ is a bass player, probably a lot of you will just right away just go to that big wooden instrument, boom, doo, 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 in that sort of jazz idiom. Obviously classical music, that's what a bass would generally be as well. But a lot of you probably would go to bass guitar, which is that electric thing that looks like a slightly larger version of like a Fender Strat. And again, it's got those same 4 strings, tuned, generally speaking, the same way. But it is not a big, giant wooden instrument. It is a medium-sized wooden instrument. It's played worn rather than sitting on its own peg leg. So there's a lot of differences between those two basses. Ron Carter does not play what I've heard Rufus Reid refer to as a pork chop, that bass guitar. It's a much smaller instrument. But one of the things that a bass guitar, generally speaking, will have that an upright acoustical bass will not is frets. So the frets are on the fretboard. The fretboard is that long neck. Essentially, it's the neck of the stringed instrument where you run your fingers up and down to make the different notes. So you've got one hand initiating vibrations in the string, either with a pick, with a bow, with your fingertips, and then you've got your other hand, which is essentially pressing down the string at different places on that fretboard in order to make the different pitches that come out. On an electric bass guitar, that neck is called a fretboard because it has frets. The frets are those raised metal bars that go across the fingerboard in these intervals that start out sort of a little bit wider and then get narrower and narrower and narrower as you get down towards where the pickups are and then the body of the bass. And those frets stick out of the fretboard a little bit, and if you're playing bass, you are pressing the string down on the far side of that fret to basically have that fret then be pressed up against the string. And those frets are in very specific locations so that when the bass strings are tuned, pressing down the string behind each of those frets gives you a very specific note. B flat, A, whatever note you're playing, you're going to hit that fret, and you know that that's going to be the note that's being played, assuming your bass is in tune and assuming your bass technique is decent. An upright acoustic bass, the neck is not called the fretboard, it's called the fingerboard, and that's because there are no frets. You'll notice that the fingerboard of an acoustic bass is smooth. It doesn't have those raised metal bars that go across it. And so when a bass player is fingering the notes on the fingerboard of an acoustic bass, he has an infinite number of choices as to where he can press the strings and produce the tone that he's trying to get. And what that means is that they're going to be a little bit more finessed. You can slide more. When you slide on a fingerboard, it's a smooth note. Boo, you know, boo. You're not hitting any of those frets where you're going to go do. However, the other thing about playing on a smooth fingerboard is that without those frets assisting you to hit those right notes, you have to hit them by ear, and it's called intonation. And what that is the precision with which the bass player is putting their fingers down on that fingerboard to get those pitches just right. They could be off by a millimeter, and the pitch of that note is not going to be exactly maybe where it should be in terms of the harmonics of the presentation. And so when you hear a jazz bass player playing along, any halfway decent bass player is going to be rocking along with that walking line and hitting all the notes just great, or sliding into them with some bluesy intent. But you will sometimes hear pitches being sort of off, intentionally or not, maybe during a bass solo. Maybe they're going up really high, maybe they're just kind of going all over the fingerboard and really just kind of jamming out. You'll hear that a lot of those pitches aren't necessarily right on notes, and they don't necessarily line up exactly note-wise with what the piano or the horn or whatever the other instruments might be playing. One of the things with Ron Carter, and I think this is especially when he's bowing, but it's also when he's finger playing the melodies, is that he is often way out of tune. And it obviously doesn't bother him because he's releasing these records. But there are some records where he's more out than other records. Maybe or maybe not, this is going to bother you, but it's, for me, there's an endearing quality to it, and it's something, possibly because Ron Carter has put out more of these kinds of higher pitched melodic bass driven records than most artists have, maybe all artists. But it shows up more on Ron Carter records than on any other that I know of. And that was quite a bit of a tangent. Sorry about that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you at the next video. Bye.